you very much for having me. This is, I think, the 6th community council I've been to, so I've got one more next week, the Western Creek Community Council, effectively giving the same presentation just to let you know and hear your thoughts and feedback on Transport Canberra. You will have heard a number of different announcements over a period of time, but I thought I'd run you through this and tell the story for you about what we're doing in public transport across Canberra. So really, what the government's objective is to improve public transport for you, no matter where you live in Canberra. Transport Canberra will be a new transport agency, so we think this is the most significant change in Canberra's public transport history. We think that Transport Canberra having one integrated transport agency, which has a vision of one ticket, one fare and one network, and to integrate Canberra's public transport network. Key to that is our mass transit systems, which will be light rail and our bus network. We need to deliver a system that's convenient, efficient, reliable and affordable so that more people use it and more people want to use it. Really, this is informed by what we already know about what a good public transport system delivers. That it's integrated, that it's a genuine alternative to using the car, and that gives people more choices in how they move around the city. Mass movement in terms of light rail or buses, and getting to major public transport routes, particularly through walking and cycling, but also other innovations that help feed mass transit routes, and I'll talk about some of those later, which might include new technology like autonomous vehicles, the new technology that we're seeing that has enabled car sharing and ride sharing as well. We know that public transport works well in many cities across the world and in Australia. The ones that are here that are the international examples are really cities that are a similar size to Canberra that really integrate both light rail and buses really well. Lyon, Nice, Valenciennes in France, and cities in Germany and the US. What we know about Australia at the moment is that the Gold Coast, Adelaide and Sydney, obviously all larger than Canberra, but not all significantly larger than Canberra, and they have over their histories started light rail as recently as last year, really, for the Gold Coast, and already committed to a stage 2 of light rail. Adelaide is the same, and Sydney is the same, and more recently committed to light rail in both Parramatta and Newcastle as well. So we know integrated transport networks work in cities our size, and what we know about our own city is that it's growing, and it's in a region that's growing as well. So over the next 20 years our population will be over 500,000 people, and we will have up to 1 million people living in our region, many of whom will commute into Canberra every day. We know that congestion across Canberra is going to cost nearly $700 million over the next, or less than 15 years, and what that really means in reality is people just spend more time in their cars, which means it takes them longer to get to work, it means less time being productive at work, and it means less time spending time with their friends and family and doing things they'd rather be doing than being stuck in traffic. And we have to manage this growth on many fronts, and I know that the Inner North Community Council, you know, that you're seized of that. There is growth in this area, there is change in this area as well. The government's plan for this in terms of transport is to have an integrated transport system and to plan for this future. We know what it's going to look like, we know what the alternatives are. The Labor government, and at the moment a Labor government with a Greens minister as well, has made a clear decision about what we're going to do to manage this growth in terms of our transport network in the future. We want to provide more transport options, more choices for how you can move around the city. Again, making genuine alternatives available to people so they don't always have to use their car, or they may in some situations just not need to buy a second car, for example. And we also, this network and this vision is about improving public transport wherever you live. Obviously there's been a significant focus in the last 3 years about Stage 1 light rail corridor, which you're in the heart of, and the Gungala to Civic route is the Stage 1 of the light rail network, but I'll talk a little bit more about the frequent network as a whole, which has been articulated over a number of years, but was articulated most recently in the Transport for Canberra policy document, which I'm sure people here contributed to discussions at the time, which was also informed by the Gungahlin to Civic transit corridor studies that were done throughout 2011 and early 2012. Last year, the government launched a public transport improvement plan. In that plan, one of its key features was the establishment of Transport Canberra as Canberra's first ever integrated transport agency. It's going to integrate our transport network, it's going to innovate in our transport network, it's going to have a clear focus on the customers of that network, the community who use it, those that currently use it, and the more people we expect will use it when we have it operating fully. And we really just need to get back to that key point about managing Canberra's growth. Buses, of course, are key to this and are all across our city at the moment, and will remain all across our city and remain just as important a part of an integrated transport network as they are in many places around the world. The role that they play may change in different parts of the city. Obviously in stage 1 it will change, where light rail will now provide the mass transit option on the stage 1 route, but buses remain very important to us. In the most recent budget, just a couple of weeks ago, we announced, for example, 20 new buses to add to our existing fleet or to replace the older buses. And we're currently looking at options for our bus network in the future, and that will mean that we will need to buy more buses. We also committed to an electric bus trial in this year's budget, so we will probably, depending on the outcomes of a tender process that we'll have underway, we may have 3 electric buses that we can trial in Canberra on different routes to make sure that electric buses are going to work in the city and which types of routes that they might work best on. We announced a range of new services in this year's budget, including new services in the Western Creek, Molongo Valley area, which is a direct line from Western Creek into the city, a more regular route that currently doesn't exist, and also new routes in the growing Molongo Valley region, particularly for the new suburb of Coombs, and additional bus stops in the suburb of Wright as well. And really importantly, and this is in your patch as well, but it really I think will be a significant new service that we will start in 2 weeks, the new city bus loop. So I hope you've heard about some of these new services that are coming that were funded in this year's budget. But the city loop, we think will be a real change for people. We believe that there will be people who might use the bus in Canberra for the first time ever, or for the first time in a long time. The bus loop will really travel along London Circuit, up into Braddon, through Mort Street, down Northbourne along Barry Drive, in through the ANU Exchange, down to New Acton, and then back again onto London Circuit. It's a free bus service. It's going to run every 15 minutes from 7 AM to 7 PM Monday to Friday. It'll connect the city east-west. It'll connect Braddon with New Acton as 2 new kind of really vibrant shopping, dining, eating precincts. It'll connect ANU, and it'll also connect to a lot of services that we have going into the Parliamentary Triangle. We probably, till we took a fresh look at this, I don't think we even appreciated how good our bus services are into the Parliamentary Triangle, not least because the Blue and Red Rapids both run through the Parliamentary Triangle, and so therefore run really frequently every day. There'll be a new bus depot that we will build at Woden to manage the growth in the city, and we recently undertook a major review of our bus network, and it really did indicate to us that we need new depots, one on the north side and one on the south side. The south side one we need sooner, so there is money in the budget both to design and construct a new bus depot in Woden and Phillip Trade Precinct. We also know that with the addition of light rail to our public transport network, it significantly already increases the public transport supply in Canberra. So it's the equivalent of 1.2 million bus kilometres that we will redeploy to other parts of our network to increase the overall supply of public transport. So not only does light rail provide us with much increased service along the first stage, it means those buses currently travelling up and down there every 10 minutes and more frequently every day will be redeployed to other parts of the city to increase bus services in other parts of the city as well. And I know you will have questions about what it means for bus services in the inner north as well, and I can talk about later. And light rail, we think light rail is the best solution for the most congested road in the city, which is Municipal Avenue. So we know it's nationally now a significantly congested road, according to Infrastructure Australia, that we need to do something to plan for the future of Northbourne Avenue. The road cannot take much more capacity in terms of cars, and very little more capacity in buses that are currently on the road. So I think whichever plan is put forward for Northbourne Avenue, and I think you know well what our plan is for light rail and the median, Northbourne Avenue is almost beyond capacity now, and there's literally not enough room to put a new lane unless you have one lane solely for public transport and reduce it to 2 lanes of traffic. Our solution is to have a very limited, if any at all, buses on the current road lanes and a light rail dual lane in the median. So it's significant, with light rail in the median going both ways, significantly improves the capacity for transport along Northbourne Avenue. We know that light rail is convenient, efficient and a very reliable way to travel. The very fact that it's a fixed route provides certainty to passengers, and it also provides certainty to investors along the route, both commercial investors and residential investors, people wanting to buy their first home and without seeing. So again in the paper just on the weekend, that those benefits are already flowing. There are people already investing along the route, and both the Northbourne section of the route and the Flemington Road section of the route, because they know that light rail is coming. Light rail has a component to it that buses simply don't, which is to generate economic activity along the route. Again, that's the certainty of. Now there has been development along the route, particularly along Municipal Avenue, but we've seen a significant increase and different decisions being made about economic investment along the route since people have known that it's going to be a light rail route. The first stage is due to be completed in late 2018 and operating in early 2019, and we're now in the process of actively considering where stage 2 goes. You may have seen the light rail network master plan that was released for public comment last year. Again, it's really based on the Transport for Canberra policy, which came out in 2012, which laid out all the frequent routes across the city, and we look at those frequent routes, and stage 1 from Gungahlin to Civic is part of the frequent network. Other parts of the frequent network include key corridors to the Parliamentary Triangle, to Woden, Western Creek and the Longlow Valley, Tuggeranong and Belconnen. There's not a lot of disagreement on either side of politics about where our frequent network is. There's disagreement on the node in terms of different parts of that network. Another key component to Transport Canberra is active travel, walking and cycling, and innovation. So we've invested a lot of money in our cycling and walking infrastructure. We know we have more to do, but we are looking particularly at ways to integrate our walking and cycling infrastructure with light rail and buses. In the latest budget, I've had a focus on also focusing on other key community hubs like shopping centres and schools as well, to make sure we get active travel options around our schools and around our shopping centres to make it easy to walk or cycle to those key community hubs. Some of the innovation that we've already seen, Uber and ride sharing, it's here now in Canberra. We're the first jurisdiction in the world to really regulate Uber, to have it arrive. Has been a disruptive technology. It's been disruptive to existing industries, but we think in terms of the way that the ACT government approached it, worked with the existing industry, which is largely the taxi industry, and also Uber itself, that is operating in other jurisdictions and causing quite a bit of concern. The community doesn't have a sense that it's safe and reliable, that the drivers are registered and licensed. You can do that, you can feel safe that Uber drivers in Canberra are registered, have gone through a process, and you can have a safe option for travel. Car sharing is here now as well. I don't know if anyone's used car sharing.
Oh, no, I'm curious about that.
Oh,
I tried to advocate it 20 years ago.
Oh, you were ahead of your time. So it's, well, it actually started when IKEA opened. So one of the two firms, there's Popcar and GoGet, they actually established car sharing at the IKEA site when they first came, opened up last year. But I think April, we provided 18 car parking spaces to the two car sharing companies. And they have sites here in Dixon. They have a couple of car parks in Dixon, east and west, the city centre, Parliamentary Triangle and Russell. The NCA were keen to partner with us to provide some of their car parking spaces because it's just an alternative for people who might want to, for example, have a meeting that work in the Parliamentary Triangle or Russell and need to get to another part of the city. They can, both companies have enabled free membership for the first 2 years, which is the period of the trial. And it might cost as little as $5.50 an hour to rent a car. And if the car's full of petrol and you don't take it very far, you don't even need to fill up the petrol. So we're due to get an update on how they've gone in their first few months of operation as well. They view themselves as a public transport option, as providing an alternative to public transport to the community. One of their focuses is obviously on people who don't own cars, but people who might who want to use public transport during the day to get to and to commute to and from work, but then maybe need a car during the day to go to a meeting, or families who might no longer need that second car and don't really want to have all the cost burden of full ownership of the second car. They can access and so we're looking at options now to have the car sharing opportunities further out in regions and not just in the centre of the city. An electric bus trial, which we funded in the budget, a new ticketing system, which we funded also in the budget. So we have a $3 million investment in a ticketing system in the budget, and that will be an integrated ticketing system for light rail and buses. That's essential. But it will also provide other opportunities, for example, to access bike cages, to use parking rides, and potentially use for other parking and transport options like parking, for example. Booking parking at special events, using on government-run parking facilities as well. Community transport is a really important service, and we've been doing some work with the community sector. The government runs a flexible bus service, which we nearly have rolled out to all of Canberra. I'm afraid the only part of Canberra that we haven't yet rolled it out to, but I can tell you that we will, is the inner north. But Northside Community Services actually provide quite a lot of community transport options around the inner north. So the combination of the regional community services, which has a significant fleet of community transport vehicles ranging from large buses of sort of 20 to 25 to smaller cars, plus our own flexible bus service, we think there's huge opportunity there to better utilise an existing fleet of community transport vehicles. And for example, our flexible bus service picks up people roughly between the hours of 9:30 and 1:30 and will take them to shopping centres, medical appointments and hospitals for free. And it's a door-to-door service which has been really successful and still has some more capacity, but we think there's an enormous opportunity with technology in particular to do more of that service. And autonomous vehicles, there's a working group established that has community, private sector and public sector participants that's really keen to promote Canberra as a trial site for an autonomous vehicle trial. In the budget we have a Transport Innovation Fund as well, which we have available to us if people have some innovative ideas that they come to us and let us know, and we can in fact fund that through this year's budget. Just a little plug for our new directorate. You'll all know TAMS very well, but on the 1st of July, TAMS will become Transport Canberra and City Services Directorate. It'll integrate Transport Canberra with all our city services functions. You might know that the Parks and Conservation function is moving to the Environment and Planning Department Directorate to be part of a new single nature conservation agency. So that'll bring together what you might have known as the Parks Service into the Environment Directorate. So what we will retain is our city services functions, which includes our roads, our waste, all our city services in terms of mowing and weeding and cleaning and graffiti, keeping the city beautiful, and our libraries, our very special libraries as well. What unites these two parts of the directorate is that the staff in them provide services to everyone in Canberra every day, no matter how old you are, how young you are, where you live, what you do for a job. Someone in this directorate touches your life every day. It might be that at a certain time of your life you'll have no contact with the education system or no contact with the health system or the community services system, but guaranteed if you live in Canberra, every day you're interacting with someone from one of these two parts of the Transport Canberra and City Services Directorate. As I mentioned before, I'm particularly keen and have a focus on linking the transport network with key community and social hubs like our shopping centres, our schools and our playgrounds, and really helping to create a modern city that's managing its growth, that our children will want to grow up and stay here and provide opportunity for them. Just a question that we often get about, to take it back to some of the cost basis, particularly for light rail and how we manage the city's priorities in the future. The stage 1 of the light rail project equates to, for every $1 we will spend on the light rail contract, we'll spend $33 on health and $24 on education. So well over $50 out of every $100 that we spend will still go towards health and education. Public transport will still be important, but to give you that sense of the light rail cost, it is $1 in every 100 for the stage 1 route. Obviously, when we commit to stage 2, that will increase slightly, but we think public transport's worth an investment, and public transport will always be part of the services that a government needs to deliver. We think it should be an even more important part of it. I think that's what it shows us what we can afford to build and operate light rail in Canberra. So simply, what we mean by building an integrated transport system is improving public transport no matter where you live. With light rail, we're significantly increasing public transport capacity in Canberra. We're providing more choices in how you move around the city. We want to provide quicker and more comfortable, more reliable journeys on public transport. The idea of being able to walk to a major public transport route and not have to understand what the timetable is, not have to wonder when the next vehicle is turning up, is the sort of public transport system we know works for people. We want to make it a better experience. There is quite a lot to be said about a comfortable seat, a well-maintained public transport vehicle, good shelter, comfortable shelter, good lighting around major public transport stations in particular. I know for a lot of women, safety and lighting around bus stops and light rail stops is really important. And we really have to reduce road congestion. We do want to prevent further roadworks. We made a number of significant road investments in this year's budget, but overall we want a lot less grey infrastructure and more green infrastructure across the city. Public transport is an affordable investment for the city. It's one we want to continue to commit to, and again, light rail as a component of that is an affordable project for the city. And really, this is our plan for the future. This is Labor's plan for the future, the government's plan for the future. Light rail corridor has been in the city's planning for 100 years. We think it's time now to build light rail, where there's been multiple studies, a lot of community discussion about it. We committed to it before the last election, and we're delivering on that commitment. The next steps, did anyone do the public transport survey that we had?
Yeah.
Good, lots of nods, so great. So we're just starting to get that back. Sorry?
I do a bunch, okay.
You did a bunch?
Do you get paid
it took
for
a
it?
little while, so it won't take any much time. So we hope to have some key findings from that in a couple of weeks, and we'll be sharing the full results very soon after that. What we do know is nearly 3,000 people took the survey. 2,000 people were part of a phone survey, a targeted phone survey, and that there were online surveys done by people jumping on the bus and talking to people at bus stops as well. So a pretty significant reach across the Canberra community, and not just by people that chose to do it or were aware of it. We actually contacted a real spread of people across the city. So we know that we've reached people who don't use public transport, so we're particularly keen to hear from them about what works for public transport. We obviously know a little bit about what does work, where there's rapid routes. We know that works really well. When there's not easy access to rapid routes, less people take public transport. We committed more than $70 million for public transport in the most recent budget. Transport Canberra starts in July, and we will be announcing a stage 2 of light rail. You will know that before you get to vote in the October election about where Labor's commitment and the government's commitment to deliver stage 2 will be. So, thank you, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay, anyone? Let's do it. Questions? Anyone?
Is Kathy here?
No.
Somebody else.
That's all right. Anyone have a question?
I've got questions, but you might want to do the light rail question first, because mine's not on the light rail.
No,
on transport?
Okay.
I
Sorry, Marcus.
I just wanted to, I guess, make a comment. I mean, I took did the transport survey that
State.
Sorry?
Question first.
Well,
Sorry. Okay.
It's always hard.
What sort of made me start thinking about is that since I moved to the inner north, I actually haven't caught a bus in Canberra. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, the regular trips that I make, it's easier to either walk or ride my bike.
That's great.
And the irregular trips that I make, it's takes about a third of the time and significantly less cost to drive. Just doing a quick search, on a route, when I needed to go to a suburb, in the south to visit a friend's house, it would take me sort of about an hour and a half to get there by bus, when I could drive there in about 20 minutes. And to me, that's a pretty big problem. Well, I don't know if it's a problem. I guess it's an issue that perhaps in the inner north, public transport isn't such a necessity for some people. Either we can walk or ride our bike, or when we need to go for trips to the outer suburbs, it can be easy to drive. And to make it sort of cost effective for walking, riding or driving, the cost of public transport would have to be significantly reduced, and the efficiency, I guess, of the network would have to be significantly increased. And that's not an easy thing to do, obviously, with a limited budget. So, I guess, do you want to comment on that?
I've been in Canberra for 16 years. 8 of those years I've been in Gungahlin, and the other 8 was in the inner north.
Right.
And the reason I lived in the inner north when I moved here was so I didn't have to own a car. And circumstances changed, and we slowly moved out as our circumstances changed, and you basically had more second child and looked around and found it was more affordable to live further away, even though our options were changed. But in that situation, one of the the rapid lines, the Red Rapid, had just started to. It wasn't quite the Red Rapid then, but there was a frequent route from the Gungahlin town centre into the city, and so we had one car and 2 kids for quite a few years. And we chopped and changed with using buses because it was close to a rapid route. Now not everyone has that choice, so the inner north is, for a lot of people, walking and cycling is a good option, and we can do more to improve some of those networks. And Sullivan's Creek Path, we've invested a lot in that, and that's significantly improved because I lived on that path for quite a few years as well. So yes, if you want to get from the top of Hackett to the top of Narrabundah, just as an example, it's probably not going to be that easy. The tensions in public transport systems is between frequency and coverage, and you can't have both. You can't have the best of both. And in a city like ours, which is relatively spread out and not as dense as other cities, but where you have high density corridors, you can have rapid services that are more sustainable, and that is why the Transport for Canberra plan has transport planning very aligned with land use planning around where you might have corridors of density where public transport becomes a much more sustainable and viable option. But yes, you're right in terms of coverage and also outside commuting hours as well, increasing the services outside of commuting hours, either on weeknights or on the weekends as well. What we're doing is having a really significant look at our bus network. Like I say, we know what our frequent public transport network looks like, and we've chosen to build light rail along part of that network, and we'll choose to continue to build light rail on another part of that network. It's pretty well known, that network, where those major public transport corridors are. We're not diverting from that. We are maintaining a commitment to integrate transport planning and land use planning. Other policies divert from that, and that's an alternative, but whether that's a well thought through alternative, people will make a judgment on that. But the other thing that we've also done is to increase those opportunities when you might want to travel somewhere that you don't normally travel, but it's infrequent. When I lived in the inner north and we needed to go somewhere else, there wasn't an option. There weren't as many rapid bus networks to get you to another major node. Uber the taxis have always been available, so you could have always called a taxi to get that last kilometre or the last 2 kilometres. Uber does provide you a real alternative to that. Car sharing provides you a real alternative to that. If there are business models in car sharing, in the car sharing world, that enable us to have those, for example, at the Woden Town Centre and the Gungahlin Town Centre and the Tuggeranong Town Centre, or at the airport, for example, that just opens up more options for people. A public transport network is not going to be able to service every nook and cranny, but if the only other option is a private motor vehicle that you have to then use on roads, using parking, so a lot of land goes to parking. A lot of land in Canberra is surface car parking, which is probably one of the least efficient uses of land and least sustainable uses of land. We have other options that can get people those shorter distances. People are more familiar with using them. If we provide people who are less able to access those services with genuine community transport services that meet their needs, then we have an integrated system that gives people more choices. Some of these are very new and very different for people to use, but we see cities around the world integrating many different types of transport.
Thanks.
When and how will the government meet its commitment to a 10.5% public transport journey to work mode share, which was supposed to be met by this year?
Well, that's a target. So it's
it's an election commitment.
It was a target for us to meet an election commitment, and we will be.
Yes.
Well, so it's a target that we've had, and it's been in our planning documents for some time. We're yet to meet it, and you know that, and we know that. So, and we've seen, like I say, we've seen shifts in where there's good public transport patronage, and although it's remained stable across the city, it has increased in some areas and decreased in others. So where I don't know if it was on the slide actually mentioned before, one of the other initiatives we funded is the building a new park and ride in Moniessa. That's on the Blue Rapid line, where it's based on a lot of feedback from people that they don't have an opportunity to get easily to the Blue Rapid line, so instead they drive. If they could park in Moniessa, for example, right next to the shops, and jump on the Blue Rapid, they would use it. So it's not necessarily just the buses itself or the routes themselves, but it is that additional infrastructure like a park and ride, like a bike and ride. It remains our target, and Transport Canberra is all about achieving it. So all of these changes are to drive patronage in public transport, provide people a genuine alternative to using the car.
Okay, now you've been making changes like that since 2004, when you first set up these targets, which included 9% for 2011. By 2011, you achieved 7.8%. In 2012, you committed to 10.5% by this year. Within 2 years, it had dropped to 7.1%. And if you look at the action bus patronage targets, it won't get back to 7.8% until after 2018.
Well, we think that, so what light rail does, for example, along the current corridor, is each vehicle will travel as frequently or more frequently during the existing hours, but each vehicle will have twice the capacity virtually. So each light rail vehicle will have 200 person capacity. Unless we don't always have articulated buses which have a similar capacity but not quite as good. They start earlier, they finish later, they travel more frequently over the weekend, and they finish them up even later than the current services. So the actual capacity along the existing corridor will be significantly improved. We know that patronage already along that corridor is very high, and the highest in the city. Very often a bus leaves in peak hour Gungahlin town centre and it's full 2 stops later, and people have to wait for the next one to come through. There's very little more capacity in the current buses and on the road to take more people. We think that Transport Canberra and adding light rail into our transport mix and further investments in buses, in new services and new facilities around the bus network will make that change.
And have you modelled the patronage that you expect from those changes?
We have on light rail, and we're doing the rest of the network now.
And when will you release those results?
In terms of, well, we will be talking about what our new network looks like. Again, you will know what that looks like before the election.
But will you release the modelling results that show how much these changes are expected to increase patronage?
Well, to the extent that we can, for example, the census is being done in August, and that is one of the main ways we collect data about, the most thorough data that we will collect about that is through the census, but we won't know that until sometime next year. We are looking also at the public transport survey in a lot of detail about what people are telling us about what will make them shift or use public transport more often.
I've got a shop in the Dixon shopping centre, so I guess my question is more about that shopping centre. My concern is there's a lot, that's going to be a major hub for the light rail, which is going to be great. There's a lot of construction going on around there. There's government land there, which is the village centre, which is getting quite old and tired.
So you mean where the health centre is? And
where the post office is, where there's Commonwealth Bank, it's the other side of Woolies. So the library is quite run down, the whole sort of area there is quite run down. My question is with all of the redevelopment of the light rail, all of that, is there any budget being created to bring these areas up in line with all the new buildings to make that all consistent, or is it just sort of, has that been on the table, do you know? Or?
So are you saying that the Australia Post building is owned by the government? No.
He's talking about pedestrian core.
Right, the public realm around there.
Yeah,
to be honest, I actually don't know. I mean, I actually know Dixon really well, but I don't know which parts of the public realm are all, who owns what, and I'm not too familiar, I have to say, with the new development and its details. So, but certainly we do, and Dixon Library is certainly on my mind, as the building itself has some. You're right, it's ageing, but it's also not big enough because people love it. It's one of our busiest libraries, and we know that we need to do something in the near future on Dixon Library, so that is on my mind as Minister responsible as well. In terms of all the public realm, and I'm afraid I'm not across the detail, and you guys know that really well. I've talked about the Dixon Group Centre redevelopment a lot. So if there's a specific question, I can get it answered for you, but I probably can't do it right now.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. It's just basically, will there be a budget created to bring up the community, sort of communal area there?
Yeah.
Where the trees are and the pavers.
And forgive me about a Dixon master plan.
Yes.
And when was it done?
Sometime.
2013.
2013, yeah. So I'm quite conscious as the Minister for now TAMS that many of the recommendations made in master planning processes are then developed up and implemented by TAMS, and we could do that better. So we made a number of commitments in this budget around master plans around the city and investments to start to implement parts of those master planning processes that TAMS is responsible for. All those sorts of things, footpaths, lighting, upgrades. I think that the significance of the Dixon redevelopment, has that been approved? Not yet, it's imminent, I believe. Is that right? Do we know?
Supermarket.
Yeah, supermarket development is, major private sector investment is something we need to work with, and I'm afraid I just don't know enough about the current status of that to know, but I will definitely take that back in terms of the master planning as it relates to what TAMS can deliver, and have a look at that and get back to you specifically on it.
Thanks. Jane.
I'm conscious that roads and public transport obviously get a lot of airplay, but your portfolio covers an impressive range of different city services. So my question is really about play space. It seems to me that when new suburbs are being released, very creative play spaces are being installed in new parks, and that's great because it's encouraging those to be used by younger people. But of course, the demographic changes that are taking place in older suburbs all across Canberra mean that there are now many more households with younger children moving into older suburbs or having children in those older suburbs. And of course, there are a great many playgrounds that are now suffering a fair bit of neglect, vandalism, and quite sporadic maintenance, which obviously does come under the transport. So my question is, the procedure for nominating playgrounds for upgrading hasn't worked very well in the past. I know I'm trying to do it a number of times for Dixon, which has one very, very, very old playground.
Is that the one?
It's the one with the froggy.
Not over on
Where the Dixon wetlands are.
Yeah, that one.
I've forgotten the name of the street.
It's basically got an antique slide.
Yeah, I know one.
I think I've played on a slide like that.
Yeah.
Well,
And
was
really
it the
that's
same
all
slide,
it's
was it? Could well be.
I know the one.
I recognise the cost of upgrading is incredibly high, and there are a great many of these older playgrounds now dotted all around Canberra. So my question is really, how do you go about bringing stuff up to a good standard when you have that problem? And obviously, it's difficult when you have a lot of other calls on your budget.
Well, playgrounds are special to me as well. So we've had $3 million in playgrounds in this year's budget, and that includes sort of 4 major upgrades. About 30 playgrounds that are getting shade sails, because one of the things we know about a lot of playgrounds and shade sails are robust shade sails that have a long life, are pretty expensive. We've got about 20 playgrounds that are getting significant shade sails. Corroboree Park in Ainsley is one, and then we have we have been looking at new types of play spaces. They're really known as natural play spaces, where there are not lots of equipment. They're more natural play spaces for natural play, where it's wood and logs and rocks, and where kids can guide themselves as opposed to being guided by the equipment, which a lot of the new equipment is very, it's amazing, but it's a different type of play. So there's one of those going into O'Connor, but then there's quite a lot of money in the budget for upgrading those play spaces that don't meet the current safety standards. So I'll particularly have a look at that one in Dixon, because I do know exactly the one you mean, and whether it's on that list. There has been a significant audit of all the playgrounds, and we really have a combination of starting at the bottom of the least safe playgrounds, playgrounds that were built over many years. The standards keep increasing, and the gap, we're trying to very much keep up with that, and making sure that where there are unsafe playgrounds, we have to assess those first. I don't know what the playground that's least compliant with our safety standards are, but there is a process. TAMS cleans most of these playgrounds every week, so they have a pretty good sense across the city of where there are significant risks and significant upgrades needed. But I'm happy to have them sent to me and put into the process, but I would particularly take that from Dixon.
I suppose one of the things, I'm just following up quickly, that does concern me is obviously when there's a very, very high standard out in newer suburbs, and it sets the bar very high, but it also makes it really quite unaffordable to bring everybody else along. And it may be that there's scope to do simpler things, but that could work very well. So I know the new park that's gone in next to Canberra Section 5 and has some really wonderful little play spaces in the creek.
Kingston Foreshore has a similar, as at the playground at Kingston Foreshore is quite similar. And I think there are different types of playgrounds being built, like the one at Camp 5, like the one at Kingston Foreshore, and like the natural play spaces as well. So less equipment led and more play based playgrounds. And we tried one, it wasn't very successful, but we thought we'd try different parts of Canberra to see if it's going to work better in different parts of Canberra.
Bruce?
I was wondering about transport connections. So I live in Hackett and work in Woden. So I catch a bus to Civic and then just catch the blue rapid to from Civic to Woden. How will that work with the light rail? Will I still be able to catch a bus into Civic, or will I have to catch a bus to the light rail, then the light rail to Civic, and then a bus from Civic to Woden?
I can't answer that, but what I can tell you is it's not. I have heard people say that every single bus in the inner north will have to come into the light rail route and then be fed into the city. That's not the case. What we're currently doing at the moment is looking at the frequent network and then the other connections that we know we need to have for light rail along Northbourne Avenue. So I can't answer the question except to say that it's an often asked one, and we're doing that work right now. We know we've got 2 years to plan for that, and like I say, the objective of Transport Canberra is to increase patronage and make people's journeys easier, but I don't know exactly the answer from Hackett. It may well be there's an alternative route to Civic and you will take that alternative route, you just won't go along with one avenue.
If I may add to that, I've just been at a meeting where Emma Thomas was present and discussing this as well, and she said that they've actually started work on this over the last week or so, and they'll be answering those questions. But in particular, bus route 39 in this part of the world has come up a lot. She had a thing about bus route 39, but she also said that no, it will not mean that every bus route in North Canberra will go to the light rail.
No. Or for people, there's quite a few Belconnen-based services that come through and use Northbourne Avenue. It's not the case that some people might want you to believe that that's the case, but it's not. And we know that the bus services will need to change, and that's because we'll have more buses to redeploy with light rail, and we know that it's going to take some time to plan that, but we don't have the answer now, but we will well in time for those services to start, and we will have more information for you on the frequent network itself before the election.
Thank you. I guess that's related to the question. It says which areas in North Canberra have shorter summer water. So I guess there are people concerned about what effect light rail will have on that.
You can reassure them that it doesn't mean that everything is funneled into Northbourne and forced onto light rail. It means that there will be a different network, but our objective is to, with an objective of increasing patronage, having services that can get people from A to B quicker, that's the objective behind the planning. And like I say, the light rail alone enables us to redeploy existing bus services to other parts of the city.
Just on that, the environmental impact statement proposed that the Route 39, instead of going to Northbourne Avenue and straight down, would become a joint route with one of the ones that wanders through O'Connor and Lynham. So you'll have the option of getting on a 39 that goes down to Northbourne Avenue and then spends time wandering around Lynham and O'Connor and eventually gets to the city without you having to hop off and wait at the pedestrian signals and then cross the road and walk to the tram stop and then have the tram comes along. So,
Well, look, we'll come along every 6 minutes.
at the moment we have buses 3 minutes on average.
Uh,
Is the light rail going to match that frequency?
Well, it's going to have double the capacity on every vehicle, and it'll be every 6 minutes, but the other services that are there are also services that might not be solely along that first route.
Okay, over here.
My question is about trees.
Yep.
Over in Corner, and at the moment, houses being sold left, right, and centre. They're all being knocked over. We've got very large houses to replace them, and usually like every tree on the block, the ones that have trees just disappear. Not to mention, say, they often take the street tree out as well, because they have the one around the corner from Just Wait, because they might have 3 cars, driveways, so that they don't need a street tree, so they just chop it down, it just disappears.
I don't think they can do that.
I'm sure that they can't, and that's,
They do.
and so my question really goes to, I understand that when people remove trees either on their block, that they shouldn't have removed or they damage them, so that they ensure that they'll die, or they get rid of street trees, that it's actually quite difficult to prosecute. I understand there's almost no prosecutions of that kind of thing, because, are there, do you have any thoughts or proposals on anything that could be done about it? Say, for instance, on the next block to me, on the next corner to me, the house there had maybe 3 large trees, and they were cleared, but there was ones on the corner that they absolutely weren't allowed to remove. So they attempted to remark it before it was reported. But I mean,
This is very common here. I support
exactly.
that. what you're saying.
And you just know that in the next year, once the house is finished being built, those people will move in, and something will happen to the tree, and it will suddenly need to be removed. I mean, no one believes that. And say, in the last week, we got a note from one of the real estate agents that said, "Oh, are you looking to sell your house? Because basically we've got this buyer in the area and they've got 2 houses and they want 10 more in the region." So this is obviously some kind of developer who's planning to just move in, clear out houses, put these large things up, and these people just clear blocks.
In terms of clearing on blocks, I can't, that's a planning question which I'm just not too familiar with. I haven't been,
They
to
yeah.
provide comment on that. So in relation to trees on blocks,
And
you're absolutely right that you can't just clear field, you need approval, and that can be obtained through the planning process.
I understand that. I mean the ones who just do it anyway.
But if there is evidence, well, if you're saying that you have a wind bark and trees from that, as soon as you see that there is clear evidence that the tree's been wind barked, please let us know, the tree protection unit, and we can and do prosecute.
Oh, I've certainly reported this.
Absolutely.
But what I mean is they didn't complete, the tree's still alive, that kind of thing. But once they move in, I'm sure that something else will happen to that tree, because they don't want it.
Even causing harm to the tree, so not killing it, causing harm to the tree is an offence. And we can
So if they
prosecute.
knock over their street tree,
They're not having
are you able to do anything about that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, street trees.
That's-
So
that's
if it gets
even more so.
reported, and you know there's a street tree there one day, and the next day
And it's
you
not
come home
there.
and it's just gone, obviously you don't know about it unless someone reports
If
it.
you let us
But if,
know.
but if we don't see it or photograph it being taken down, are you able to do anything about it?
There are some difficulties, you're right.
Yes. Because
Because
I understand almost no one
it.
gets prosecuted for these sort of things at all.
But having said that, if there is if it's reasonably obvious that it's inside this particular property and there's development occurring on this property, then through the process of discovery, we can certainly push as far as we can. And we have prosecuted in relation to street trees being removed in the past. We are also currently doing a body of work in relation to looking at the Tree Protection Act and the powers that are available to us under the Tree Protection Act, which is it's body of work that the Directorate is doing, yet to brief the Minister on that. But there is some work we are doing to look at. At the moment we have state level powers in relation to compliance, where we probably need more local powers, bylaw type powers other councils have. So that's the work that we're currently doing for consideration of the Minister.
In the 6 months I've had in the portfolio of the hundreds of I've had one there about one tree on one street in 20th Street in O'Connor about a tree being removed. I know what it's a significant established street tree in the inner north would take some time to we couldn't do it swiftly and remove it pretty quickly. So I haven't had many actual direct complaints. So if you do know of street trees in particular being removed, you can certainly let me know. Let Tams know directly to Fix My Street. There are lots of opportunities to report that, and it will be followed up. Every inquiry is followed up. There are a lot of them, and they are prioritised, but every inquiry is followed up.
So just to make sure I understand, so whether it's street trees or even trees on property, like the tree protection, or is that under your remit?
Street trees is with me and with Tams to come and look at. We prune them, we sweep up after them, and we protect them as well. So, and we plant new ones. So, but in terms of the planning process itself, that is, you can still Fix My Street, the online page, Fix My Street. You'll still be able to report that, and then you don't need to see where it needs to go in the background to make sure that that's followed up.
But I guess just related to that, because this is related to number 7, I suppose, on this question. But
This is a huge.
But again, yeah. So I'm just some trees that aren't street, they're on a property that's been cut. That's the one hand, and no one enforces it. And then you have, on the other hand, I know of people who the enforcement goes the other way, where they think the tree's dying and ready to go, yet they can't do it.
Yeah.
So there seems to be this rather inconsistent, sporadic, sort of enforcement of things, and it's kind of all over the place. And that's if we have qualified arborists who assess trees for danger, safety, and many lay people will look at a tree and have a different view. We need to trust the experts we have. They can be challenged, of course, but there are often reports of trees that people find dangerous, and many do get removed because they're dangerous. And we know that there were dangerous trees on Northbourne Avenue which we've had to remove, and as there are around the city. But we will in almost all circumstances replant. I know for old established trees, particularly in this region, it will take a long time for those trees to regrow, but I suppose the other thing, it's related, and again, it's about enforcement, and it may even be a resources question, because, again, neighbors complain about parking on nature strips. They call up, I guess, Tams or whoever it would be in the future, and they've actually been told where we just can't be bothered to check, even if there's photos. And in other words, and you can see all around the inner north where people are just doing it all over the place. And
I distributed leaflets around Canberra a year and a half ago, and I counted 150 obstructed nature strips, and over 100 of those were actually gardens that were built right across the nature strip, so that was forcing people to walk out on the road as they were going past. There was just too many to report.
I just know that Reed, for example, has a few issues as far as that sort of thing. So,
parking on nature strips is not allowed, and in terms of enforcement, largely that's with Access Canberra. So, which is the kind of the enforcement licensing under the ACT government. Again, it is what we will prioritise in terms of enforcement is clear safety issues. So where there's maybe line of sight is blocked for people, where it's unsafe, people can't see around the corner to turn, or look, it's near schools as well, where people. So when we know there's a lot of kids, there's a lot of activity, then we will enforce it. But certainly they're busy people, and they are people see a problem in one part of Canberra, and we try to deploy those resources as effectively as possible to make sure we're addressing the highest priority reports on any given day. Because if more people do the right thing, we'd have we'd have.
On the issue of safety, there's a lot of enforcement of parking rules in our city where there's pay parking, and that doesn't seem to be a safety issue. But when you've got cars or you've got gardens stopping people from forcing people to walk on the road, that seems to get lower high priority, even though that is a safety issue.
Well, enforcement of parking in Civic is important because we need to encourage a level of turnover in Civic, that people, lots of businesses and lots of users of Civic need us to do. So, look, the enforcement activities are happening across the city on any given day, and the calls on those enforcement activities are significant. They do prioritise them, and again, they'll prioritise for safety. If you view as every obstruction on a nature strip as a safety issue, then we can't be everywhere.
If you actually started enforcing those rules, then people would start obeying them, and then you
That would
wouldn't
be
have
fine.
to prosecute people.
Look, as many calls as I get from that, we get people who've had a fine or a ticket who are saying that they, it's overzealous enforcement or something. But we certainly have a number of parking inspectors, and they're across the city every day. I can go back to the specific issues in the inner north around specific, in Dixon maybe, around enforcement of parking in Dixon.
Well, they could walk around Canberra, I can show them 150 places.
Okay, we can get them to have a look in Canberra.
And probably any other suburb would do the same.
Yeah.
Is that in your portfolio, Minister?
No.
Sorry, Access Canberra is under
Chief Minister.
Chief Minister. Okay.
I was going to say, I'm happy to be on, if you want to see the details of particular streets that are of concern, I can then make contact with my colleagues in Access Canberra, and what they will do, if there is concern, they will do fixes on particular streets. As the Minister said, can't be everywhere all the time, but they might just focus on a street or two in a suburb, and then the message
But
tends to
how many parking inspectors spend part of their day looking around the suburbs for parking violations? Not in the shopping.
I can't answer that, but we can find out.
Okay, can you find out?
But I can certainly assure you, because I've talked to my colleagues about this particular issue in the past, that if there are concerns, they will go into the suburbs and take those fixes.
Actually, there was a survey that was done by the government a couple of years ago where they looked at something like 80 building sites and found that every one of those sites was in violation of the rules to be registered.
There's been a specific blitz on construction sites in April and May. So there was a specific blitz. Not only, so it was a joint effort with Access Canberra and TAMS in terms of all activities around construction sites, work health and safety, parking. Another challenge we have is once development is completed, to make sure that the use of the public realm over that period, the nature strips often have been significantly damaged, just to make sure that that is remediated after construction leaves a particular site. So footpaths and nature strips are remediated, as well as another challenge for us, but one that we are keen to do more on.
John?
Yeah, I just want to come to what this lady says. This is so critical, and it's the chair of the Hunter Residents Association. People come to me all the time.
Oh, sorry, Chair of that.
Hunter Residents. They come to me all the time with the most serious complaints. That basically, you come home one day and the whole block has been flattened. All the significant trees are taken out. There is no regard paid to them.
So when they come to you, who do you pass them on to?
I go to TAMS. I go to the tree protection unit. I have the tree protection unit as sort of right there on my computer there, so I can access it. I live on the hill. I can hear the chainsaws going. I ring them up regularly. But if you were to go and have a look at like the recent development in, I think it's Robinson Street, where they flattened the whole block. Go and have a look at 18 Fort Street. They flattened the whole garden. They took the whole thing to nothing. Go and have a look at the horrible thing that's occurring on the top there of David Street. 72 David Street. Go and have a look at these things. These violate all the planning rules. If you were to go and have a look at what was there before, right, you will see that all the trees have been removed. And I can talk to people who this has been going on for many, many years. Our leafy green, urban greeny suburb of O'Connor is being progressively destroyed. Progressively destroyed. And this is not an oversight. This is not.
I as a visitor to Lyme on a reasonably regular basis, I think it strikes me as
It's not
Having
happening in
always been
Lyons,
beautiful and
it's
leafy.
happening in O'Connor.
It's
No,
coming.
O'Connor. Yeah.
Now,
Look, there's specific complaints, and like I say, I know of one that I have had, and a letter that I've signed. Otherwise, it hasn't crossed my desk, but I will take that away and have a specific discussion with Ben and his team about O'Connor, about
you,
planning and
Mansions
what's
that
happening
are
on
being
lots.
built in O'Connor,
Sorry.
new McMansion-esques of
I
O'Connor.
guess this is one where it crosses between TANs and planning, but
So,
I don't know how well they communicate, but it's been an issue where even if a DA or, has some sort of condition to it, it doesn't look like they're followed, and there's no one who actually checks up on
someone's
it.
got to approve occupancy in the end, so.
Well, sometimes I've heard of, anecdotally, where people move in without a certificate of occupancy.
They have,
Well, they probably won't get their insurance to look after, to protect to ensure their significant new investment. Houses are being built larger, but if your concern is around the trees, I'll certainly take that back and we'll have a specific look at that.
Yeah, I think it goes into, again, the look and feel of the suburb, in the sense that, it's a certain way, and one block goes in, knock everything down, okay, that's not so bad, but then another one goes in over here, another one goes in over here, and pretty soon, we end up changing
So
the
you're
character
worried
of the
about
suburb.
the houses or the trees
Well,
going?
Both. The house, no, but I mean, it is interesting that you will find that there'll be a for sale sign of an older house, and the sold comes up, and then within a couple of weeks, there's just this huge empty block, and there've been, trees on it, and they're gone.
possums,
birds,
but
I don't know personally why you remove some of these beautiful big old trees, but
that's what they're doing.
Because they're paying nearly $1 million
I think
a
that's
block
what
for
it
it, and
is.
they want
yeah.
to put a large house on it.
Basically get the best for their money, but I guess the
I mean,
problem,
yeah.
all I'm just going to say is that part of the problem with any of these things is that it's very difficult to enforce something after it's
After
happened,
it's gone.
you see?
Well, our ability to do that is through certificates of occupancy. You can't, look, like I say, we'll have a specific look at if it's particular, obviously, a concern in O'Connor, and for the trees in particular, and provide you some reassurance about the planning process right through development application, compliance with the territory plan, and how people will have a certificate of occupancy. We have one of the more robust planning systems.
Because the other thing here is that a lot of times there aren't any development applications, they're exempt developments. So.
Well,
And they're not in keeping with the street, they overlook, go and have a look at Cockle Street, how they overlook the neighbouring houses. It's just a...
Anyway, I don't want to get too far, but I guess the point is, it is something that you can see, it just kind of permeates its way through, some of the suburbs, and I think it does, some of it falls into, your area.
yeah, in terms of public realm and our tree canopy, like our tree coverage, the urban forest is important. It's an important part of our adaptability to climate change. Having good canopy coverage is vital to that, to encouraging wildlife, maintaining biodiversity. It's not just urban amenity, it's actually important to climate change adaptability in particular, and it is an important part of our climate change adaptability policy framework. Ben might have do you have any general comments about planning?
I was just going to say that I think first of all in relation to exempt developments, they still need to comply with the territory plan and also the Tree Protection Act. So if there are regulated trees and they're removing those as exempt development, they can't, and that's in breach. So if they are, then if you again make contact with us through the certifier, there's action that we can take against the certifier if they're allowed that to occur. There's a number of different streams that we can actually pursue these issues through. What I'd suggest in the first instance, perhaps Mike, you could send through a couple of the examples in O'Connor, if you pass those on.
Yes.
Got my details, Mike, just send those through to me. I can talk to my colleagues in planning. What we'll get back to you is, first of all, we'll have a look at those particular examples just as a case studies, and we can then also send you some information in relation to exempt and merit applications and what the requirements are around trees and what we can do in terms of consequences if people don't comply.
The issue is these will all be after photos. We won't have the before photos.
That's fine. In relation to the case study, it just allows me to have a look at what did the certified was exempt development, what did they approve, because they need to submit that to the planning authority. if they approve the removal of those trees, they actually can't do that. Puts it into a merit application. So even though the trees have gone, it would be useful for me to have a look at those to understand at what point in the system did this happen, and therefore who do we target? Is it the certifier? Is it the developer? And that then helps us to start to see there's a bit of a pattern here that we might be able to do. So case studies, just send those through to me. But in the meantime, I'll work with my colleagues in planning. We'll just send through some information in relation to the various streams in relation to the approvals.
My name's Kate, I live in O'Connor. I have a question about speed limits in residential zones. So I believe the speed limit in our residential zone is 50, which is the standard unless specified elsewhere. And we have issues of people going what seems to be very fast. In my view, potentially some of them are over the speed limit, but some of them might actually be doing 50, which feels far too fast in a residential street or around a shopping centre where there are a lot of pedestrians. So I have a couple of questions. One is whether or not the government's considering lowering the speed limit in residential areas to somewhere around 40, because there is research that shows that once the speed limit goes above 35 kilometres an hour, that the death rate rises exponentially for pedestrians hit by cars, and there's research in Victoria that backs that up. And that 50 is, being hit at 50 is a very low chance that you survive if you hit at 50 compared to 35, which would be a more appropriate speed. And when I last spoke to someone who rang me calling pre-election about it, one of their...
Oh, it's Rachel.
We can talk to each other.
We were talking about changing speed limits and how the more you change the speed limit, the more confusing it gets for drivers. But I don't see anything other than signs in Canberra that indicate speed limit changes. So, for example, when you move from a 60 into a 50 or there's no 40s, except around schools.
It's shopping.
And shopping centres. There's nothing physical to remind you that you're moving. So even a painted line or 3 painted lines on the road create bumps. And I've seen areas where, that's a real, you paint lines on roads anyway. So it's not a high cost traffic. It's not even calming. It's just some sort of additional...
Rumble strips.
Whatever. Yeah, rumble strips. But before I wanted people to throw out the idea of having variable speed limits, I want to know that we tried in different ways, in different places, different ways of reminding people that they're in a different speed zone. Because at the moment, it's not getting picked up through speed cameras or whatever. So there's a few questions. One is about the speed limit, whether or not we'd be looking at lowering it to 40 in residential areas. And secondly, what kind of additional reminders that people are entering residential zones and shopping centres is the government planning to introduce?
Could I add a third one? And how it's enforced. I guess it goes back into the enforcement issue, because I suppose related to that is sometimes people are going really fast, but how do you improve it?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
The AFP have been to my place to discuss this matter, and they cannot prove, you cannot prove anything.
Well, I mean, the good news is we actually have really safe roads. Our roads, Australia-wide, and Australia has some of the safer roads around the world. We actually do have pretty safe roads. So that's some reassurance. I do get a lot of correspondence around where people think cars that are travelling really fast. Our default speed limit across the territory is 50. Where we have 40 is around schools, and more recently we've implemented them in all group centres and all town centres. There are opportunities for us to expand that at the group centres and the town centres. The town centres at the moment to cover a slightly larger area around the town centres. And and also an option to look at local centres as well, like the Lime shops or the Equine shops as well. Around some schools we have a 30k limit being trialled, and that's under a program called Active Streets for Schools. So it was started in Belconnen, and in the budget we've funded another 25 schools that it's being implemented in across Canberra. Locally here it's Ainslie, Lyneham and Brindabella, because they're, where you've got a government and a non-government school nearby, you've still just got hundreds of children, so we may as well get more opportunities for children around all school zones to walk and ride more safely to school. That particular program looks at each school and the movements of kids around each school, and really it provides alternative drop-off points in appropriate locations in the suburb that might be anywhere sort of between 300 and 600 metres from the school. Is actually signposted, and then the safest walking route or cycling route to school is literally painted on the footpath. Any crossing of any roads is then assessed to see whether it's safe or not, or whether we can put pedestrian island in or other options that we might have. And we're looking at the moment, we're trialling Dragon's Teeth, which is a marking on the road around the school, or 30 kilometres an hour, and we've just got to do some assessment on which one obviously works better or which one works better in which circumstance. So that's going to be rolled out to 25 more schools. There's 3 here in the inner north and spread across the rest of the city as well. So
is that a pilot or a stage rollout?
It's a stage rollout.
So we will definitely get it at our school.
You will definitely
at some point.
Yep. So we've done. We funded last year in the budget 4 schools in Belconnen, and in this budget we funded 25, and they are an assessment of where we know there are existing traffic and transport issues around schools, and where schools that have implemented the Ride and Walk to School program. So there's a program that's delivered on behalf of government that comes in and teaches largely primary school kids at this stage, but we're starting to look at high school kids as well. Skills around walking and riding to school, and that includes literally riding a bike, road safety, knowing how to be safe on the road, knowing personal safety on the road as well, where they've had that program rolled out in the school and where there's been a demand from the school. So we've got the sort of the top 25. The other thing we funded in the budget as well, which is part of this package, was the Active Travel Office, which previously was an Environment and Planning Directorate, now is part of Transport Canberra and City Services, and we've funded that Active Travel Office in there, and we've also funded for the first time a Schools Transport Coordinator to work specifically on transport issues around schools. It's one of the biggest issues that I get raised from schools is congestion around school car parks. Some schools are at the end of their tether and say we just need to build more roads and more car parks for our school. And that's hugely expensive, and I just think it's not the best way that we can manage traffic congestion around schools.
So picking up on Mike's point though, just going back on the schools issue, which is slightly different to what I was talking about, but is related. So educating the parents, teachers and children about road safety is really important, especially when you're pushing people to try and walk or ride more than they have in the past. But you've still got the drivers driving past at 60 miles an hour or more. So when you're doing that with the school, is that associated with higher visibility for drivers who may or may not care what's going on around the school at the same time, so that we're not just educating people, oh, you've got to do this because the drivers will obey the rules, which they don't, and we know someone recently was hit at Lyneham by a driver as they were crossing the crossing and doing everything they should have.
I didn't know that, so that was a child.
Yeah.
No, it was
They
never
accelerated into her because they weren't looking. So she was crossing the cross. This is, I think, it's the same one. She was walking across the cross. She was on a bike, going slowly. There are other kids coming. The person thought they saw a gap, was watching the other kids and accelerated and hit her, and she went up on bonnet.
She all right?
Yeah, she's okay.
But the issue is, while you're doing all that great stuff around the school, is there a co-thing happening around the speed?
The co-thing is the 30k or the Dragon's Teeth. So it's a real visual. The Dragon's Teeth are a real visual marker of slowing down. We don't have any current plans to change the 50k residential limited in suburbs as a whole. A lot more line markings on all our residential streets would be an interesting thing to test with the community about whether they felt like that was too much sort of visual pollution. So that is an issue. If there's too much visual pollution, people can tune out a little bit, which is part of the reason behind having consistent road signage. Where it's complex, people don't follow it.
But the road signage isn't consistent. So today I was looking at that, thinking coming tonight. Coming along Durandra, it says 60. The sign before that said zones in Canberra 50, and that's marked otherwise, so it says 60. You turn off Durandra and nothing to say 50. So if the sign's not there, and there's no sign on Hack Street coming off Miller, if the sign's not there, how do you know you're in this new zone? So it is very confusing.
Specific examples are welcome, because it might be a couple of specific examples that
Supplementary on that.
Can I just briefly reinforce what Kate has said here? Two instances. One was an instance of a car going some 70 k's down the street and nearly collected me and the kids. Right? I went and knocked on their door. I then informed them I was going to the police. Their answer was completely unsatisfactory and they lied about the speed that they were going on. When the AFP came and contacted me, he gave me a lecture on how to guess speeds, but you have to come up with some evidence in court. People completely ignore on a selective basis. So I nearly been run off the road on other occasions by a woman in another high-powered foreign vehicle going at, I would estimate, no joke, 80, 90, 100 k's an hour down Florence Crescent, while on the phone, right, and when I went down King Her at the O'Connor shops, the boyfriend came trying to bash me in the head. And the only thing that stopped me being bashed off my motorbike was I was wearing a helmet. And he pulled his punch. And that is no joke. And I took that to the police, and again, they could not establish who the driver was.
Right, well, on Dennis, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Dennis, just before you, I just thought of one specific example. Check Torrens, I think it's Torrens Street between Garraween and what it turns into. And I'm pretty sure I've seen a 50 and a 60 and Couillon. And it's a very short period where you actually see the speed limit change. So
Thames, I mean, there's a road safety action plan which Minister Rattenbury released just a couple of months ago. Has a lot of actions around consistency on signage. So there is, where there are real examples, we can actually look at specific examples. The trialling of the Dragon's Teeth is another example. The views that people have about how quickly a car is going often can vary. If there are significant and repeated complaints about a particular road, Thames does do a lot of works with the AFP on enforcement and also does do testing. So I do sign off, I would say, at least half a dozen letters a week about a particular road and work that has been done over a period of time to survey the speeds on that road. Where there is obviously consistent with speeding on a road, there will be enforcement measures and there will be traffic calming measures, which could take a whole, there could be a whole range of different things. Often people's, assessments of how fast a car is going isn't always as accurate as a consistent measurement over a consistent survey over time. We have people very busy looking at these things every day. They're just in different parts of Canberra, and we really do rely on you and the community to let us know where it's happening and where you have concern, because like I say, we will always get to them, and I know, for example, if a lot of people will contact me about the same issue, or then it is a signal for me that it is an issue that we need to look into. If you have 10 in a week, for example, it does give an indication of where there are issues to look at.
Just on the safety around schools, Meegan, has there been any consideration of using school crossing attendants? And I'll make comment on that. I mean, the world's best safety device is a cop in the rear vision. Funnily enough, it seems to change people's habits. In a similar vein, a human attendant at a crossing has a similar effect, but the added effect that, and I'll use Lynham as an example. They cross like Brown's bloody cows, the kids. You know? They cross like Brown's cows, you know. Well, and you're there, and the next one, and a crossing attendant would be able to corral and platoon the kids. Well, this is what happens in Melbourne, etc.
It makes less frustrated drivers.
Yeah, it makes the less frustrated drivers.
I agree. And look, this is what our new schools transport coordinator is going to look into. In fact, I think there was a discussion this week on 666 around Lynham in particular, which I actually missed. So some schools do it and they take it on themselves to do it, and they'll rely on a body of parent volunteers to do it. I know that schools are reluctant to have teachers do.
Yeah.
They play 50 different roles every day at school, and I would be reluctant. I briefly spoke with Shane Rattenbury, the Education Minister, about this, to add this to the list of things that we ask teachers to do. It's not what they're trained for, it's not what they're skilled at. But I take your point, lollipop. In some, I grew up in New Zealand and they still have a program where it's the older kids in the school who have a responsibility to do it.
You look at Victoria, they have
across some schools,
a very good program.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, Alison.
Okay, my name's Alison. I'm the Secretary and the Public Officer for the Lynham Primary P&C.
Okay.
I'd like to comment that we've discussed this issue at length, and I have flatly refused in my official capacities for the P&C to take on that type of role because I have done it as a Year 9 student in high school in country South Australia as a traffic monitor on main roads with trucks and heavy vehicles, and it's the sort of responsibility that volunteer parents and other members of the P&C community, in my opinion, should not be expected to carry in terms of legal liability. You know, if a monitor doesn't turn up to a rostered duty and someone is injured, the blackmail would just be phenomenal.
Do you have a view on what, if you've discussed this at Lynham,
we're in discussion with the Roads ACT staff and the Education Directorate staff about what some options may be to carry out some re-engineering of the crossing. I believe lights are possibly part of that conversation, subject to a future budget bid, with other discussion about where those lights would be most validly situated. I wasn't aware that there'd been a more recent incident, so if you guys would like to speak with me out of session about what that more recent incident, I'd like to know about it. Lynham High, okay, not primary, okay. So it's something where we're really conscious that, particularly with urban renewal and with increasing numbers of people rat racing through the back streets to shortcut into town, avoid traffic lights, etc., that people from out of area are using the roads in the inner north and the inner south, finding back roads to get to places where they want to get to, principally for work. And it increases traffic levels. We've seen a rise in the incidents of car crashes, as per the data that was published in the Canberra Times last year, etc. So it's a complex matter, and we also recognise that it's not just Lynham Primary experiencing this, it's a wide array of government and non-government schools experiencing this.
So I don't know if you'd arrived when I mentioned that Lynham and Brindabel, have the active streets. So there's funding in this year's budget,
which is great.
And we know, like you say, along what's your road at the back there? Brigalow. That there's two schools there. There's other co-located campuses across the city where you have, in Harrison, for example, and Anneroo, you've got 1,800 children at the high school, and the Peter 10 school, and 700 at the Catholic school.
And we know that in new suburb areas that this is, with schools that have got major demographic pushes going through their suburb areas, it is a significant matter. I'm very conscious that with urban renewal pushes, where we don't yet know what the population influxes are going to be and the changing requirements for education in those areas, it will need some master planning to make sure these matters are addressed, but at the same time trying to encourage people to be more active, bike, walk, etc., and not have the expectation, like many people in Canberra do, that they can just drop off at the front gate all the time and breach traffic rules in doing so in some cases that I see regularly.
I've been asked kids' schools at P&C and been working with a few, principals and teachers and parents, and so good. Well, we'll look forward to working with you more on that. The school's transport coordinator is hopefully going to take all the issues and come up with some solutions. So its principal role is to not say to you as the P&C chair in the school community, oh, we don't look at this car park around the school, that's education, you can go off and talk to education directorate, or you can talk to another part of the directorate. We want you to be able to have one person that can work with you on solutions.
But that interface with the broader transport modes is critical to say, well, why are kids being driven to school in private vehicles? Can't there be more use of transport routes and bus runs, etc.? So
yeah, and bus runs are included, and that's why the Transport Canberra is perfect, because it has city services, which still has the roads and all the active travel infrastructure and public transport component too. So.
Is
Quick
change in
follow-on on
service
that.
provision going to change parental attitude?
Well, can I just add, are you ever, like, for example, buses for school buses, is that under yours or Shane's?
No, school buses. So we'll actually work with the regular school bus routes. That's always been action and will remain. What's called special needs transport, which is the transport provided for children with disability from school, has been in education. That is moving into Transport Canberra on the 1st of July. That will integrate that within Transport Canberra and allow us to look at the whole picture, and will be part of our community transport provision as well.
Thanks, and Marcus.
Yeah, just I guess following on from some of the recent questions. I mean, you've mentioned, report the streets where there's traffic problems and things, but I think Roads ACT has a pretty good idea of where the traffic problems are. They have a traffic warrant system which ranks all the roads, or at least all the sort of major residential roads in Canberra. I think North Canberra has 4 roads in the top 10 worst roads in Canberra and 6 roads in the top 20. That was reported in the Canberra Times last year.
Yeah, there are quite a few different measurements.
Oh, right. So we've got different measurements, so you can pick the one that you want, I guess.
Well, no, there's, like I say, there's arterial roads, collector roads,
So there's all of that. So there's, significant data saying that we've got significant problems on residential streets in the north. And yet, you have a residential street improvement program in the ACT government, and yet not a single road in the north has been included in that program.
So the residential streets,
Yes.
so there's been significant improvements on Antill Street, on the intersection, the signalisation up near ACU. There has been and more work to come around the Dixon Group Centre. In terms of residential streets, I don't. Each year in the budget we do have a residential streets improvements program. A part of that more recently has been the combining age-friendly suburb program, which has been in Ainslie. Currently Ainslie and Weston are the first 2 suburbs that's been rolled out in. So quite a few improvements on the streets in Ainslie. The specifics around residential street improvements, we have an ongoing program every year. It's funded each year, and again it's funded this year. I can't recall off the top of my head how much it is, and we haven't yet determined the work program for this coming year.
I mean, the last one that was addressed, I think, was Copeland Drive, and that was ranked 17th in the traffic warrant system.
It again will depend on whether you're talking arterial, collector,
Well,
because residential streets aren't.
No, well, it's not arterial. These are major collector, minor collector, and access roads. And the last one that was addressed was Copeland Drive, which was ranked 17th in the traffic warrant system according to the Freedom of Information request that was published in the Canberra Times last year. So it seems to me that the roads in the north are just being ignored or marginalised for some reason. I'm not quite sure why.
The inner south would disagree with you. They say they're
Well,
Central Canberra, I suppose.
Can I say I've been to every community council. I've got Western Creek to go. Each one of them will have told me that they're not, our community is not getting as much attention on A, B or C than
But I think you have a traffic warrant system which ranks these roads as the worst in Canberra. I think Angel Street is ranked number 1. you know, in terms of traffic volumes, accidents and speeding.
Let me, if I could, take, I'm not familiar, I recall the Canberra Times articles last year. Let me, if I can, take essentially a question on notice around any North Canberra roads, and let you know what we've done and what we plan to do. That'll give us a chance to see whether we have missed something or we aren't looking at it as thoroughly as other parts. And if we are, we'll reassess that, but if not, we'll let you know what it is that we have done and what we plan to do.
I mean, well, just, I guess, following on, it's, I mean, I've been looking into this for about the last 4 years, and so I've sort of got a reasonably good idea about what's been going on in how roads are being managed by the ACT government. And, you know, the suggestion of reducing speed limits to 40 kilometres an hour, that we recently did a quite extensive consultation with our membership, and that actually, it wasn't unanimous support, but it actually got quite a substantial amount of support, you know, probably around 60 or 70% of our membership supported a reduction of speed limit to 40 kilometres an hour. So I'm interested to know why that's been, I guess, rejected, or the reasons why that's been rejected by the ACT government.
I wouldn't say it's been rejected.
Oh, okay.
It's
I
not,
thought that's what you said.
no, I said we don't have plans to do it.
Okay.
It's not the same
Right.
as looking at a proposal and rejecting it. So
Right. Well, because I mean,
but we have looked,
yeah.
like I say, we have looked at, and we have, and school zones have been the case for a while, and their hours have expanded, so it's all day rather than just, you know, 8 till 9 and 2 till 3, but around town centres as well and around group centres. I understand that you will often, and we often get consultation that tells us that the community supports a particular measure, and so we've rolled them out, and they're not always received like that when they're actually implemented. It's often quite a different, can be a different sort of response. But certainly, like I say, we are looking first and foremost at town centres, group centres. We're currently considering whether we expand the regions around group centres or look at local shopping centres as well. We haven't looked at all residential streets, but I can again take that on notice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the
It would be
first
good,
point.
Marcus, it would be good if Meegan can commit to giving us a response on that specifically around the residential areas.
I mean, we did send you a transport position paper. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that, and that was, you know, it's a controversial, it's not an easy change, but it was one of the first points that, suggestion in that paper, a reduction of speed limits on residential roads. So.
Even if the government was willing to just pilot, you know, if there was community support for a suburb or for even a particular subsection of a suburb, and pilot the idea of there could be a living streets sort of measure, picking up the notion of the European sort of notion, and trying out the idea of a 40 zone for a while.
Okay. Well, like I say, looking at group centres and expanding the existing group centres where they currently are, perhaps a little bit wider, which, you know, might mean Dixon, for example. But I'll have a look at that as a pilot. I imagine the advice to me, and the technical advice to me around road safety would be to do a whole suburb rather than half a suburb, just so that it's clearly signposted. Yeah.
Okay, I'm noticing the time here. It's almost 25 past 9. I don't know if there's any burning question now, or
It's budget estimates week, so we need to be mindful of people's diaries.
Thank you.
The transport position paper, Marcus has been working on that for about a year.
Well done.
He had long hair when he started, he's nearly bald.
Towards the end of last year.
Iteration after iteration, until finally we could get something we could agree on. So it's not just something that's sort of suddenly come out of nowhere.
there was a lot of effort too. I mean, herding cats, you know, it's like everything.
I know what that's like.
Same kind of thing. So,
I
okay.
appreciate the work. So.
Look, appreciate you dedicating the time, and I really appreciate everyone having some really good questions. I think they were really thought-provoking, and I hope you'll take them on board as well as this.
I will, and I think we've taken notes, but if you have notes about the things that I've said that I will follow up on as well, you're very welcome to send them through and remind me. So.
Yeah.